there is a report that the new dispensation is trying to set the stage for a controlled election. Publication Daily Star in Bangladesh reports that Bangladesh interim government led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus has prepared a draft to amend the International Crimes Tribunal Act 1973. This amendment would allow the banning of political parties for up to 10 years for committing crimes against humanity or genocide. I am joined by Suhas Chakma, Director, Rights and Risk Analysis Group, Major Muhammad Ali Shah, someone who has served in Northeast, Defence and Strategic Affairs expert, and then Ambassador Sina Vikri will be joining me, former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. Let me straight away go to Suhas. This is a three-part discussion. One is this, and then secondly I am going to go to the Chakma issue. Going by this draft rule, what is your assessment? What's happening?
It basically shows that they are trying to rewrite the history, that they had come into power with the promise to provide democracy, and what they are providing is basically banning of the Awami League, which means that they are scared to face the Awami League. So one way one could say that despite the excesses committed by the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina, it remains still very popular in the country, and that's why they are so scared that they are thinking of bringing out this legislation to ban political parties. I think everybody understands the command responsibility is provided under the International Criminal Court, the ICC statute. This ICC statute is provided at international level, but what the Sheikh Hasina government had done, it did not meet the international standards. And what this Nobel laureate is trying to do is basically replicate the same thing, actually become worse than Sheikh Hasina. So whatever complaints we are against Sheikh Hasina, I would say that at the end of the day, Nobel laureate is proving to be more dictatorial than Sheikh Hasina. One can understand that there are certain responsibilities which are to be fixed. Then you file cases against individuals. You do not file cases against the political party itself. And whenever there is a common responsibility, please remember that those who are drafting this law in Bangladesh must remember that there is no law which applies retroactively. You cannot apply a law based on the past, from a back date. So if there were excesses committed by the Awami League, they have to be tried under the existing laws. You cannot ban Awami League based on a new law unless the Awami League commits, war crimes and etc. So this is absolutely legally untenable, and it basically shows that the old man has, lost his mental balance. And I still want to say, and I still want to point out one particular point. If this is the road which Muhammad Yunus is taking at the age of 84, he will not be different, and he will face worse fate than Aung San Suu Kyi, and many of the prizes he is taken, including for democracy, peace prize, they will be, snatched away. International community will support them to build the rule of law. International community cannot support them to break the law itself. And what they are proposing with the aim to ban Awami League, you cannot ban Awami League based on the past offences. It has to be based on the current laws, and it doesn't provide banning of any political parties unless you declare as a terrorist organization.
Okay, fair enough. Let me go across to Mr. Shah. Mr. Shah, what are the implications if you imagine a single party rule in Bangladesh in context of India's Northeast, where a principal supporter of that BNP right now, maybe it can become the principal leader, outpace them, Jamaat. So what are the consequences, sir?
Right, Karthik, that's a very, very good question.
I think there's a bit of a technical issue. I'll come back to you, Mr. Shah. Ambassador Veena Sikri joins me. Madam, this discussion is divided into basically three parts. The first part is the amendments which are being circulated, which means that it's clearly telling us that there can be an action against Awami League leader. The second part would be in the what is happening in the Khulna, the letters being sent to temple, and third, the issues of Chakma. So first part, your response, is there a possibility they can go in for a controlled election whereby they can decide which leader can contest, which leader cannot contest? Can they disable Awami League as a political outfit through these amendments?
Well, that certainly does seem to be the effort. The effort certainly seems to be to disable any party that they think would be, a threat in the elections. Because I think within Bangladesh, as I'm sure Mr. Chakma will support me on that, there is a great increasing demand for early elections. And even the BNP is more and more asking for early elections because without having elections, the very constitutionality of this present government, of the interim government, is being called into question, and the legality, whether it has because otherwise the interim government, even according to the earlier parts of the constitution which had provision for a caretaker government, that was to be there only for 90 days and only for the purposes of organizing free and fair elections. There was absolutely no scope for any policy decisions or major changes to be made at this time, and certainly not at all any scope for changing the laws or for reforming the constitution or anything like that. But we have found in the last few weeks in Bangladesh that there are demands for changing the constitution, there are demands for changing the national anthem and changing even the national flag of Bangladesh. So I think this proposed changes in the International Crimes Tribunal seems to be very much part of that. It reminds me of the effort that was made at once by the first Prime Minister Sheikh Mujibur Rahman when he started Baksal to have a single party government and so on. It wasn't well received by the people at all. So I think that the main issue that we have to look at is how are these issues going to be received by the people of Bangladesh, because they are very committed to a democratic situation, they're very committed to early elections, and this is the kind of it's a totally unfolding situation. But I agree with you that the amendments that have been made really do provide for some summary dismissal. That means, you can say that so-and-so has been committing genocide or so-and-so has committed a murder.
And these amendments, madam, they have been circulated, which means that you can set a stage whereby you can decide the candidate, you can actually have a say on the party, you can control the elections, you would know which person can fight and which person can be disqualified.
Yes.
Because the Daily Star report categorically states, which we are quoting, that the field investigation is on. And obviously these field investigations will have a bearing. But let me draw the attention of you on another aspect, which is the attack on minorities. They have not subsided. Chakma has held a protest at Jantar Mantar, New Delhi today.
Yes.
And this happened, and this has happened in Delhi, and it is against the coordinated attacks on indigenous hill tribes on September 19-20th by illegal plain settlers and Bangladeshi army personnel. The attacks resulted in the death of at least 5 indigenous people, their death, and 70 got injured. 200 homes and businesses were destroyed. Now, Chakmas, they are a community which are not limited to Bangladesh. Chakmas also live in India. In fact, the Chakma areas could have been part of India, but that's a different story. That's a completely different story. So Chakmas are angry, and this is coupled with what's happening in Khulna, as I said, the third part. Now, several Bangladeshi Hindu temples in Khulna, Dakop area, have received letters demanding 5 lakh takas in exchange for permission to celebrate Durga Puja. Now, Puja committee leaders were warned of severe consequences if they failed to pay, leading some to consider cancelling the festivities. Mr. Chakma, do you think that this is just the tip of the iceberg? That in the name of the revolution, the children are being devoured?
Well, I think, the minorities in the country, we are always under target. And that's also one of the reasons why Sheikh Hasina's government was actually different from the other governments. At least the minorities felt secure. And now, repeatedly, I say this Nobel laureate has come, and Nobel laureate, in the name of not being in control of law and order situation, then even after 1.5 months, actually trying to justify not taking action any kind of for any kind of violence against minorities. And look at the types of response which they give. It turns out to be a typical chamcha government of the United States. So there was this attack on the Chakma and other Tripuris and other tribals in CHT on 18 and 19th of, sorry, on 19th and 20th of September. Then on 21st, there was a visit by the three advisors to the government, including on the Home Minister and the CHT Affairs advisor, as well as the local government's advisor. And local governance advisor, who is supposed to be the cabinet minister, he goes and calls on the charge affairs of the United States. And once he was done, then again CHT Affairs advisor goes and calls on the charge affairs. So when you have the charge affairs being actually summoning the ministers, it tells something about the country and what is going wrong. And the CHT, as you rightly say, and the attacks on the minorities are on the tip of the iceberg. It basically shows that they have no control of anything. These people believe that beyond the reach of law, and they believe that they go and call on the charge the affairs of the US embassy after forgetting each and every protocol, which Madam Veena Sikri would be aware as the former High Commissioner, former Ambassador of India. I mean, I have never seen a minister going to an embassy and calling on the charge affairs as if she is the local boss there. So they are not in control of this situation, and if they continue to bring this kind of laws, and if they continue to bring this kind of treatment, they will very soon lose every credibility. And Yunus has already lost. See, you can possibly...
Ambassador Sikri, this American hand is something very intriguing. I have to put this question to you, madam. India has collaborated very closely with the Americans. But first Sheikh Hasina spoke about it. She spoke about that island. Then Suhas is putting a reference there in context of the minister and the charge affair. How do you put this? We have a completely destabilized Myanmar, and now people are openly talking about the American hand in Bangladesh. We have a new president in Sri Lanka, whose party in 1980s, parent party, if I may say so, madam, led to so much of bloodshed. Then we have Maldives. I mean to say, in context of South Asia, please put this in perspective. What's happening?
Well, let me talk about 2 or 3 things that you have raised, very important points. One is, let me begin with Bangladesh, because that's what we're talking about, and then I'll move on to Sri Lanka and then to Maldives. I think in Bangladesh, what Mr. Chakma has revealed, that the advisor of the interim government, who is definitely cabinet ranked person, is calling on the charge d'affaires of the American embassy. This is indeed very shocking. This is very revealing, because it supports what many people in Bangladesh are saying. The people of Bangladesh are saying, and they're repeatedly saying it, that they believe that the Americans were involved in the in the support for the Jamaat-e-Islami, and the Jamaat-e-Islami is now the power behind the throne, and they've been allowed by the Americans to come to power, and they are retaining power, and in order to retain their power, and in order to hold an election only when they are in a position to be the only party, and then they will be the only party who will come to power, they are doing this by bringing in amendments and so on. So I think this question has to be looked at more deeply, because there is absolutely no reason otherwise why the cabinet ranked person of the government of Bangladesh, interim government of Bangladesh, should have gone and called on the charge d'affaires. Okay. I know that if it happened at any time during the Awami League rule or the BNP rule, this would have created a furor in Bangladesh, I think. And secondly, I want to say that seeing all the people, the Chakmas demonstrating at Jantar Mantar, and the placards that they are holding, I mean, this shows the deep sense of hurt. And I have been following the events in Khagrachari, and really they are very shocking, because the way in which the houses have been burnt is exactly the same as happened throughout Bangladesh for the Hindu community. And the Bishop of Bangladesh has also made a statement about the attacks on the Christian minorities. So I think this question of the attacks on the minorities certainly deserves to take up a great attention, and we must focus on that. I think what you said about Sri Lanka, I think if I compare what has happened in Bangladesh and what has happened with Sri Lanka, I must say that Sri Lanka at least has fully followed the constitutional and parliamentary processes. 2 years ago, there was an identical movement in Sri Lanka as happened 2 months ago in Bangladesh, when the people, the Aragala movement, they overran the presidential palace and the president of the time had to flee the country. 2 months ago in Bangladesh, the same thing happened, and the prime minister had to flee the country when the people, students, went and overran Gana Bhavan. But in Sri Lanka, what happened was the people went right back to parliament. They trusted the existing parliament. They elected a new president through the parliament, and after the president completed the rest of the remaining term, elections have been held, and we have a new president. And this president, yes, you're right, he has a very revolutionary past, but he ever since he formed the NPP, the National People's Power Group, it is a much more broad-based group, and he's talked now of working closely with the neighboring countries, including India.
Okay.
He's actually visited India in February, and he's also talked about working with all the communities in Sri Lanka, including the Sinhala, the Tamil, the Muslim, and all the others. So I think that if you compare that what has happened in Bangladesh, where you have an interim government which has no sanctity at all in the present constitution of Bangladesh, certainly Bangladesh is a poor second to Sri Lanka as far as parliamentary procedures is concerned. And again, if I come to Maldives, what you mentioned, I think yes, President Muizu, when he was elected, did start with the India Out campaign. But I must tell you that it's the people of Maldives themselves who told him that, look, we need India. We cannot conduct our tourism operations without people coming from India. So actually, based on what the people of Maldives told their new president, President Muizu, and based on the reality of how much they need to import from India, President has entirely changed his plan, and now he's coming to India, and there is he's no talk of India out at all. There's talk of agreement on everything, on defense, economic cooperation, and anything else.
Okay, Mr. Chakma, before I close the show, today was a huge protest at Jantar Mantar. You have been following this affair. At the areas, the clips which you outsourced, the information which you outsourced, has the violence stabilized or it's still continuing there? Has violence stopped?
The violence has not stopped. Physical violence has stopped, but people are still guarding their villages. And I think one particular thing which has happened is that tribal people, because of the physical features, are easily identifiable, so they are finding very difficult to move around in Chittagong, Dhaka and Sabah areas, because there are lots of hill tribes who work in the export processing zones, and they are facing, or they have been facing, acts of racial discrimination, physical violence, isolated incidents, and it has become very, very difficult for them to go out even in the market because they fear violence. And because there is no system, there is no rule of law. There is nothing which exists on the ground, because police stations are without, in any case, any kind of policing. So therefore, you cannot lodge even any kind of FIR. So that's why I think if you look at the minority attacks on minorities in Khulna and other areas, we have filed a complaint with the National Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
Saying, that no action has been taken. So
no action has been taken.
So that's where I think the key issue is. Muhammad Yunus, has to realize one.
I think Muhammad Yunus I think he's a bit of a letdown. People had great hopes from him. To be very frank, people had great hopes from him. I think he has been a letdown. He has been a letdown.
Just one point. I think he has lost the credibility. I think if you attack the Hindus, maybe some will still accept it. But if you attack the smallest minorities like the indigenous people in the CST, you are going to lose your credibility. And the second thing which I think somewhere the government of India has to act very decisively. People in Bangladesh threatening India with the chicken neck, when if India doesn't send eggs, they cannot even produce enough eggs. So that's why we have called on government of India today that, we have to decide to, ban export of certain items to Bangladesh. They should.
Fair enough. I'm falling short of time. Fair enough. India has to act decisively. There is a challenge at the border, and the challenge will become even more complex if the pressure is from the CST, Chittagong Hill tribe areas. I think these pressures will have to be dealt properly. But the most important thing, which Madam Sikri said, that Argala movement was led by a proper constitutional process of election. But this has not happened in Bangladesh. And yes, a lot of expectations were there from Mr. Yunus, but he has been a letdown.